Terrible happy talks. Terrible happy talks.
Yeah, good to be here, man.
Whoa.
We did on purpose.
It's a Mr. Donut lifestyle. 3, 2, 1. Alright, let's do this. Today's guests are environmentalists, entrepreneurs and founders of the Bali Rivers cleanup program, Sungaiwatch. This week, they are live with me in person at Indosole headquarters in Canggu, Bali, to share their journey, experiences, challenges and hopes for the future. Mr. Gary and Sam Benchenghib, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Gentlemen, I've been trying to line this up with Kai for months now, and I'm so grateful for your time. So I'll start with you, Gary. What's a day in your life like at the moment?
Cool, man. Well, thank you for having us on the show. A day for me right now, living in Bali, it really depends on if it rains or if it doesn't. If it rains, it's river time, meaning that the emergency of plastics is really out there in the rivers. So it's all about coordinating our team to being able to do disaster relief work. If it doesn't rain, I'm typically testing out different materials, trying to recycle the plastics that we're creating, whether it's pressing it with our hot press or shredding new materials and coming up with new processes.
Yeah, wow, like developing constantly. Speaking of developing constantly, it's remiss of me not to introduce co-host this week and co-founder of Indosole, Mr. Kai Paul. Sorry.
No worries. Thanks for being here. Happy to be along with the boys.
Yes.
Gary and Sam are big inspirations for myself and the brand, so happy to be here and hosting you guys here at the shop. So thank you,
for sure.
Shannon.
It's a nice fit. No pun intended. Sam, you are based in Europe, and you
In New York.
in New York.
Yeah.
Okay, but you guys are from France originally, and so you divide your time between New York and Bali, yeah?
Yeah.
How do you like that lifestyle?
I mean, I like it. It's definitely good to have the best of both worlds. But I feel like all of our operation at the moment is in Bali, in Indonesia. But most of our funders and our sponsors come from the US. So being based out there gives us a lot of opportunities, and being able to fly back and forth is really great. Obviously, a lot of this work is management and operation, so being here is necessary. So I try to split my time equally.
Nice, man. When we say funders, like, why do you want more investors? I don't care who answers this, but why are you looking for investors?
I guess, every single barrier that we place, so at Sungaiwatch, we're on a mission to place simple barriers to stop plastic pollution from ending up in the ocean, starting in rivers. So far, we have 150 barriers on the island of Bali, mainly South Bali, Tabanan, Badung, Denpasar, Gianyar. And so basically, running a barrier, placing a barrier, one, you need costs to actually build the barrier. But then, we do everything from collection to the treatment of the waste, sorting it, washing it, shredding it, recycling it. And, every step of the process does require funding. Everything started grassroots, but now, we're on a mission of 1,000 barriers. So we're constantly looking for people to fund and sponsors.
Right, so for those that don't know, describe the barriers. Describe what they do, how they're made, and yeah, that's a good way to start. Let's go.
Yeah, they're super simple. It's PVC pipe to have the barrier float on the surface of the water. And then it's just a grid that's made out of metal. And then you can attach multiple elements together to fit the width of a river. One element is a meter long, and then you just essentially attach them together via a rope, attach it to the side of the barrier, or the side of the river, and then with the current, the trash gets stopped. And our team collects it every day, brings it back to one of our 4 facilities, and that's where the treatment starts. So the actual barrier is half the job. The other half is once the plastic reaches our facilities, and we have to sort the trash and then process it.
When you say sort the trash, like, you're dividing it up into the different, I guess, compounds?
Yeah.
So
there's...
what a process that would be, man.
There's a lot of different types of plastics. We don't realize a plastic bottle is different to a plastic cup, to a plastic bag, to foam. And so we have about 20 different types of plastics that we're dividing our trash into. And that is very manual intensive. Every day we collect around 2 tons of plastics here on Bali.
Every single day.
Every single day. That represents, probably like four small trucks in Bali. Maybe one big garbage truck full of trash, and that's all coming from the rivers alone.
How many barriers have you got out at the moment, as of today? How many barriers are out there?
So we have 150 barriers, and
so that's rivers and streams.
Yeah, some small barriers that are maybe like 2 meters wide, and some wider ones that are 40 meters wide.
Wow, man, it's 2 tons a day. So how tedious is that process? Like, have you refined the process quite well now? After how many years have you been going for?
So we've been going on for 21 months. 21 months. Just under 2 years. Started it with 3 barriers that we were operating ourselves. We didn't have staff. It was COVID. Sam and Kelly weren't able to come back to Bali. And I would basically attend to these barriers in the nighttime.
Yeah.
Literally whenever it rained, I would have to check on them 3 times a day. There was no place to bring the trash to, really just our parents' garage. And, we've learned so much in 21 months. Now we employ 80 people, local heroes in Bali. And we've learned, so much about processes, about, even coordinating the teams on the ground, when there's rain, when there's emergencies, but also just learning because, nature is a very powerful force. And, it's nothing can hold its power. Sometimes when it rains, we've learned the hard way where barriers open up. We haven't lost any barriers, luckily to this day. But wire or rope break, and the biggest nightmare is having trash ending up in the ocean. But there's really nothing that we can do. So it's learning every single day from the rivers, and every river is different.
So you're creating local jobs as well. It's so cool. I want to get into the processing a little bit more. So you have your own processing facility nowadays, yes? You employ 80 people to help you process that. You're dividing it, separating it. I hear that you're auditing companies. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Are you auditing some of the bigger trash creators?
Oh, right. You mean on a data perspective?
Well, you're doing an audit of the trash.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I didn't word that very well. You're auditing the trash, so therefore you are highlighting some of the brands that are most predominant. Mm-hmm. Is it the brand's fault? Not necessarily, because the consumers are choosing that brand, correct? Mm-hmm. So, what's the kickback been from doing that? Have you had companies want to liaise with you and discuss, their trash that you collect?
Yeah, it's been interesting. So we've audited 227,000 pieces of plastic in our first year. So that's as of December 2021. And from that, we've identified the biggest polluters here on Bali, in Bali's rivers. Danon is the first one.
I was going to say, are you going to name and shame?
I just did. Danon,
yes.
the biggest one.
I love you. Thank you.
Well, drop the bottle.
They
drop the cup.
You're not scared.
Drop the cup. Yeah, it's all cups.
Drop the cup and we're good, right? At least for a first step.
Exactly. It's all those single-use plastic cups that you find here in Indonesia. And the list goes on. But it's been an incredibly powerful tool because we then can engage in a conversation with them and see where we can take this conversation. Obviously, as you said, these companies are all in it for the profits. And so more packaging means more products sold, and it's really difficult to change the material of the packaging. But we've started this conversation. We hope to keep pushing it and pushing the envelope to stop them from polluting.
Well, have you actually reached out to the companies?
Yeah.
And how do they receive you?
Yeah, so we publicly publish the report online, but it's not necessarily shaming and naming and shaming. We really see this opportunity that the Indonesian waste management sphere doesn't have very little data, and so data in a way is what gets change happening. So every single barrier that we place is an opportunity of collecting data every single day to understand better about leakage points, whether waste management is even happening. There's something like 40% of Bali's waste that's properly managed, which leaves 60% of the waste being consumed every day in Bali that's either burnt openly or thrown in a river. And so that's a huge amount, and then there's only 2% of the trash actually on Bali that is being recycled. And so, these numbers speak for themselves. But then if you start to look into the different types of waste, every day we have data points on every single barrier, but also from a sorting point of view, from an auditing point of view. And I think understanding better what the categorization is will allow us to push for regulations from a governmental approach. In Indonesia, there's still no standard as to how companies can wrap plastic packaging. So more and more you're seeing these single-use sachets that are multi-layered with aluminum content, aluminum foil, and different types of plastics which are not recyclable, which contributes to the massive problem. So one of our main angles is really to put pressure not just on these companies, but empower the government to then take action.
It's a big job.
It is a big job, but so far we've seen that Indonesia is now pushing a ban on all single-use plastics by 2030. That's still 8 years away, but we're still hopeful. But then more so, they're putting an actual restriction on these plastic packagers to limit 30% of what they produce. So 30% of what they produce, they should actually be collecting by 2023. And that's, in a couple months' time, these major companies need to have a pipeline of seeing how they're going to be collecting these goals. So that's where our data really comes in, to push regulation, to push these companies to move forward, and to push the agenda.
Okay, I've got a bunch of questions for you because this is amazing. Have you had much interaction with the government, local and more at a federal level?
Yes, so I don't know if Sam wants to jump in here, but in 2017, before starting Sungaiwatch, we had this crazy idea of going down the world's most polluted river on 2 plastic bottle kayaks, so made from plastic bottles. This river is called the Citarum. It's located in Indonesia. It's just east of Jakarta, Indonesia's capital. And for 2 weeks, we rode down the river, not knowing necessarily what we were getting ourselves into. Turned out it was, a plastic entirely filled river. We could even move. Sometimes we were just stuck in plastic. But we released a video series on our expedition, and overnight, got the attention of different ministries. 4 months later, we got to meet the Indonesian president. And that has opened so many doors on all levels. Now, we're very, very tight with these different environmental ministries, maritime minister, which allow us to really push the agenda forward on a national level. But here in Bali, we've really been pushing the agenda on a grassroots level. So Bali is made up of, different local levels. There's Banjar, there's Desa, there's Camat, there's Kabupaten, all of these different districts levels. So, similarly to, you have like your block chief, the chief of the streets. Then you have the chief of the village. Then you have the chief of the region, or even sub-region, and then you have the region. So at all these different levels, we're super tight with everybody, trying to push the agenda forward.
Is that because you're trying to change culture a little bit?
Yeah, completely. Changing the perspective that rivers shouldn't be treated as garbage dumps.
How were government officials at the higher levels sort of receiving you? What was the feel you got from them? Was it positive? Was it supportive? Or was it complacent?
Yeah, I would say that they are super supportive in the sense that for every barrier, we have to get permission. So from the get-go, we're always speaking to them and engaging conversations with them. But we've started really from the grassroots and haven't, even met the Balinese governor. But on a national level, because now we're doing such great work in Bali and we're expanding to Javanese governors are opening us with arms open, but more in a sense that they're willing to introduce us to people and not necessarily like, we're going to fund you guys and we're going to pay for this, when it really should be the government's work.
Like directing budget funds that way.
Right. We've still not yet gotten any funding from the government.
What do you think it takes for a government to direct funds appropriately, in your opinion? What makes them stand up and go, oh, we better send some money that way? What do you think hurts them the most?
It's been tricky with with COVID budget cut downs over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's really, we're a very new startup, new environmental NGO. And these governmental contracts, in order to get big budget, will take 2 to 3 years to get approved. So it's not like budgets can be deliberated in an instant. But there's still a pool of funding that's supposed to be dedicated for emergency disaster relief effort, of which we can use that to our advantage. We've collaborated with the Army on several occasions. We've collaborated with different levels of governments, of which are seeing the emergency. In the rainy season, Bali is drowning in plastic. We're living on the island of plastic, not on the island of gods. And when news turn around, when that makes the cover of The Guardian, that makes the cover of CNN, the Indonesian government is acting very quickly.
So what? It takes some mainstream media.
I mean, that's 100% what it is. Every
you
time,
think?
The moment we send someone a video or a photo of a really polluted site, that's when people come and help. And I guess it shows that it's really out of sight, out of mind when you live your life and you go about your day living here in Canggu and you don't actually see the river because it's back there. People don't really think about it. But when they see a really polluted site, like the mangroves, when we are in the mangroves, cleaning the mangroves, and it's completely choking on plastic, it looks horrible, and we're posting it on social media, then we'll get 100 to 200 volunteers.
Wow.
And it's really exciting to see, and that's really also similar to governmental help.
Interesting. There's no talk about the fear of it impacting on tourism. Governments, are they concerned about that? If Bali is choking in too much plastic, tourists will stop coming. Is that ever a conversation?
Yes.
I think it's starting to be.
Especially with G20, happening around the block. Bali is really trying to take it into its hands, but a lot of announcements are being made and very little action are being followed. And that's something, being in Indonesia for 20 years, that we see every single day. We're just trying to maneuver through the space. Again, we cannot finger point, but we can only, help motivate and help encourage real change. So, change does take
So you're not
time.
you're not trying to be militant environmentalists, are you? You know what I mean
No.
by that? You're not trying to put people offside. Do you have an ethos of doing it in a positive way?
Completely. And
Yeah.
I think that's also the idea of, the brand auditing that we're doing. We're not, sending back the packaging that we're collecting from Danone back to Danone headquarters. We don't want to create a war. We're just trying to create bridges, and we're trying to push the agenda forward because, if you look at multiple Indonesian national companies, Wings included, Santos Jaya Abadi, these are all big, or Indofood, these are all so they make it in the top 5 of biggest polluters in Indonesia. We've not heard of them overseas, but it's like your Indomie or your Mi Sedap, instant noodles, ABC Kopi, all instant coffees and all wrapped in single use.
Which are daily staples for many local people. I guess that's where it gets tricky, right?
Yeah. So, but these companies don't have a sustainability department, and they don't understand sustainability. They haven't been confronted to it. So one thing that we're trying to do is get these guys in the rivers with us to change the perspective, and for them even to open their eyes. It's a bit tricky. When we invite these guys over, sometimes they come, sometimes they don't.
And when we speak to them, it's always the marketing department. So it's we're in touch with the marketing department.
This would be good for our image if we're associated with these guys.
And the conversations we're having with them is really how can we look good, and how can we get our logo big somewhere.
That's okay, isn't it? Give and take.
Yeah, I think it's something we're always discussing, and
it's an easy solution, and it definitely is not okay. There's a lot of greenwashing happening in the space, and we have to be strong in knowing our boundaries. I don't think it's okay to take shortcuts when you're a multinational. Produce plastic pollution. It will triple in the next decade in terms of production. But then why is the Indonesian government banning single-use plastics, and what are the actual measures being taken down? So, that's where we're seeing a lot of shortcuts being taken, and we need to hold companies, government accountable on the shortcuts.
Well, this leads well into the next thing I want to talk about, and Kai and I have discussed this in the past when he's been on the podcast. So I'll just go back. You guys are collecting around 2 tons a day, okay, and it's being processed, and I'm assuming you're storing all of this trash somewhere, correct? All nicely packaged, cleaned, washed. Tell me the next step. What are you doing with this? Kai has discussed, this concept of a secondary resource. Is that what you've created? Have you created a new commodity?
Yes, we're looking at these 20 different materials with 20 different properties, and it's looking at every material and saying, what can this be turned into that has value?
Okay.
And so we're looking at, the valuable plastics, like the hard plastics, the HDPEs, your shampoo bottles, whatever has the most amount of value, we're selling back to the recycling stream. So PET, your water bottles, we're selling that to make sure that it gets turned into a new water bottle. So we don't have to, make that bottle out of virgin plastic.
Okay.
But certain plastics we're keeping and trying to turn into products. So we've just started recently, but we're doing some exciting things where we're making 1 meter by 1 meter sheets, where we can then turn this into really anything. We can turn it into furniture, flooring, roofing, build houses. And so we're currently experimenting. We catch a lot of sandals, and with sandals, we're shredding them and then heading them over to Kai, and he's doing his magic.
Oh, you really? I didn't know you guys were working directly like that.
Yeah. I mean, these guys, they're basically just to chime in a little bit on that last conversation is they're, with this conversation that they're having with some of the largest polluters in the government, it's like they're speaking different languages, right? And they all know one same language that is just going to take a long time to get to talk with, which is the language of economics, right? So, and I think Sam and Gary are 100% aware that that's the language that starts creating this conduit of logistics and management of these resources. And it takes time, right? To get to that point where you get to the table and you're talking the same language, which is, okay, you guys are making this sachet of coffee for, let's say, 500 rupees. You're selling it for 1,000. The actual impact of the sachet post use is maybe 200 rupees because if you could somehow quantify the impact on the environment. How do we get to a point where that sachet then goes back into something else and that economics gets put back to the company, and then therefore the company wants to invest in this logistical hardship that we are facing right now, which is the trash and waste issue. It's a huge logistical nightmare, right? So if 60% of the trash isn't getting recycled or even disposed of properly, that's because of logistics. And that's where the government and big business comes into play. So I think these guys are speaking that language of peace and opening the conversation and getting to the point where they're going to now be speaking the same language as these big guys, which is really, they'll start listening when you're speaking that same language of economics, right? And so for them to get to that next step where they're now processing these, what we've termed secondary resources or recycled products, or, that second life of these issues, or of these materials, that's the really exciting future that these guys are presenting to us as a society. Is like, hey, we can do something with this next phase, this next life. And so it's like when these guys are out there getting the trash and having their team grab the trash from the river, that's almost like a quarter of the job, which just seems crazy because that's such a huge job. And then that next, basically 50% of the job is sorting it and washing it. And then that next 25%, that top off, is how do we make stuff? How do we sell stuff? What's this economics conduit that creates this whole machine, this whole movement going? And it's really hard because you need that initial push, and that's where everybody really needs to come together and figure out how we can make this initial push financially to get to that final 25% where everybody's speaking the same language of economics and trying to delineate this waste issue.
Wow.
So it's like these guys are ahead of their curve, and I always tease them, how much is Sungai valued at?
Yeah.
How much do you ask them?
Well,
let's see what they say.
It's a good question, and I want to hear it because we were joking about, like, Instagram sold for $1 billion, they got ripped off. You know what I mean? Like, but I just want to go back one more step before we hit you guys up for how much you're worth, because I want to know, right? But the process. I'm going to play devil's advocate what happens when the processing of this waste is more expensive than the production of new plastic? Is that your conundrum?
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry, I don't want to put you.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Like,
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to create is not necessarily new plastics. We're not trying to give an alternative to it. It's really more around the innovation of what to do, with this plastic that's been sitting on rivers that can only sell for so much, and create something of added value. So that's where our sheet production is so interesting, because we're creating a new type of material which is more and more becoming the norm. People love to buy furniture out of recycled plastics, but not just that, but the opportunities that represents.
But that would be expensive in itself, and then to sell that onto a consumer, how do you change the hearts and the minds of consumers then? To then go for that option, yeah, it feels good to know that you're doing something positive for the environment, but but let's face it, do mainstream consumers care? What's your opinion on that?
I mean, I would argue that, we're not selling a plastic bottle. We're selling a really designed chair that will maybe upsell, but, that will go back to cleaning more rivers.
Okay.
And so if you can buy our products, then you're helping us directly expand our operation, clean more rivers, do more research on this material, and I think that's, that'd be my answer.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. Who do you think, in terms of, like, let's say, job classifications are needed, or educational backgrounds are needed in this next phase of turning these resources into that next phase of well-designed products, well-engineered products, whatever that next phase of taking these waste items from the river and turning them into valuable goods that people desire or people can use, the utilitarian function of them. What is that group of people, and maybe list them 1 through 5? Do you think that the top most important job classification through the number 5?
Yeah, I think, we're working with different creators, material experts, toxicologists, but, designers, architects, really to have a permanent use for the material. The thing that we don't want to create is another problem out of an existing problem. So we don't want to, create a recycled plastic tile that's going to be sitting in the sun. It's going to offset microplastics or fumes by being out there. So it needs to be researched back and forth. And because we've spent so much time cleaning it up, collecting it in a river, and then, sorting it, washing it, there's no point in making more arm out of this product. So, that's where the scientific community is our number one friend in these circumstances. We're partnered up with different universities already to test the material, but really to know, that every step of the process, whether it's washing, we have a full water treatment to actually recycle all the water that we're using in the washing process, or, filtering out microplastics and things like that.
Wow,
so it's really all thought out, and it's been grassroots from our parents' garage, and now I feel we're right at the point where we're ready to scale. We built one in Bali. We have 3 small ones in Bali as well. We're building a big one in Java, a facility, and the idea is going to be to sort of scale these little resource secondary market facilities far and beyond.
And would you say that it's are they chemists? Are they chemical engineers? Are they plastic specialists? I mean, I guess all of the above.
Circular specialists,
materials experts, people who just understand, what is in the rubber, what is in HDPE, what can you do with HDPE, and
yeah, I think it's interesting. A lot of people I think are aware of this. I guess circle of the amount of people that are needed in this movement. It's not just designers or people with a dream. It's actual real-time applications, real-time jobs. I compare it to what potentially the military movement in the West would have been at in the early 1900s and the mid 1900s during the wars, where they're just getting the best and brightest minds involved. And that's something I see with you guys, that you guys seem to have the opportunity of really attracting really high level and smart people and resources that can, is that something that you guys have been sort of thinking about, of the expansion of the research element of how to recycle these materials properly?
Yeah, so we just launched a partnership with a big institute out of the UK. Like one of the guys on the board, found basically found microplastics in the ocean, and it's an amazing network of really big experts related to material experts, toxicologists, and I feel like it was like sort of a match in heaven. They came to the main professor Susan came to surprise us in the national park of Alas Purwo, down deep in Java. She made all the trip all the way just to be like, we need to partner up together, seeing the opportunity of the work that we're doing, because it's so real, right? Like the trash that we're collecting, if we're not collecting it, who else is collecting? It's going straight into the ocean. And every day it's real data. It's also sort of zooming out of the map on every single river that we're cleaning and understanding as well what are the main sources of trash and how does it end up there. So it's a multifaceted problem. We're not just dealing with what happens with the actual trash collected, but also how do we prevent this trash from coming into the rivers in the first place.
Yeah, it seems like your real challenge is obviously not just the trash collection and prevention, it's the processing. The trash processing is the big, I think I see it personally from outside looking in as personally like the biggest shift. I had a guest on here, he was episode 4, and this was like 3 years ago, Nev Hyman, ex-professional surfer and surfboard shaper, profound. And he created the Nev House project. Did you ever hear of that? The WSL had him on site at a few events at Karamis, I don't remember. And he was building the panelling. He had a concept house there, and the panelling was made from trash that had been processed, and it was compressed and I don't know exactly the terminology that they did, but it was, had a fire retardant in it, and so it wouldn't burn, and you could click these panels together. And the biggest challenge he had was finding investors to help build the processing plant. Okay, so it's just really interesting to me now, 3 years on, to hear you guys are deep in the processing of it and formulated a way to do it. I guess my question is like, where does the capital come from to get started? Has that been another one of your main challenges?
I mean, I feel like it has been, the first machine. If you were to walk into our facility when we first started, there's nothing.
Did you guys fund it?
No. We didn't. We funded it through effort and through determination and passion.
Yep.
And I think people saw that and then sponsored one barrier that led to more barriers. And then we were able to slowly allocate, small amounts of budget to buy machinery. And in Indonesia, machinery is not that expensive. We could afford one shredder. And then from one shredder, we bought a washing machine. And then, slowly
wow, dude,
we were able to get bigger and bigger. And now, we're hopefully about to onboard an investor, and that's going to really enable us to buy bigger machinery, more professional machinery. And so it's really been slowly.
So it all started with the humble barrier.
Yeah, 100%,
Yeah.
So
and
rad, dude.
it was not at all one big check. Here you go, here's a facility.
Okay.
This
is good to hear for other I mean, how do you feel about the term entrepreneurs?
Yeah, the first barrier was funded from pocket money. The 3 first barriers.
Yeah.
We just on a project, film, and then we used that money to start the 3 first barriers, and then from there we got enough intention to to start again. So definitely very entrepreneurship. We also are inventing our own machines to wash.
Amazing,
so in
dude.
terms of we're just seeing needs of every steps of the processes and trying to reinvent, because there's just no proper machine that fit it's not like you can go to to a store and walk in and buy the machine. Like even with Guy, like when we're trying to recycle these sandals and we need the perfect machine to do that, we're basing it off an industrial machine in Jakarta, but now we're trying to do this in Bali, and it's like we've been speaking for the last 2 years about how the hell do we come up with a design that's going to fit, so it's a lot of back and forth in every step of the process.
Well, there you go. There's another person that's needed in this whole ecosystem, right? A machinist, metal workers, engineers, electrical engineers even, I mean, the ecosystem is so massive. So I think just like if anybody's out there listening, you're a designer, you're a chemist, you're in engineering, you're in metalwork, sheet metal work. I mean, there's just so many opportunities to join this movement, which is really exciting. It's really apparent with Sungaiwatch. You know, us at Indosole, we do tires. It's fairly limited, and we're purchasing secondary resources from people like Sungaiwatch, but their ability to expand the reach of the people to get involved with what they're doing is one of the most beautiful things I see with what they do.
Do you identify with these guys from the ground up? Like, are these the same challenges that you guys had in the early days?
Oh, yeah, but their challenges are, you know, I think they're experiencing one of our challenges, which we ended up basically conquering, which is what do you do with a waste material and how do you make it really, you know, designed really well, made really well, really durable. I think they're on that challenge right now with some of the products they will be introducing soon. So that's similar, but in terms of the coordination of waste material as well, we had that issue in the beginning, but then once you start getting those logistical scenarios down, then that starts running itself. But we only dealt with one waste stream in the beginning, which was tires, and they're really big and they're easy to see. And they're easy to get. You know, plastics, which is the primary material that they're dealing with, are tiny. You know, I've been on some of these river cleanups. So you reach down to the bottom of the river, and you've got a whole nother gold mine of plastic that you're trying to take out. Wow. So it's just a never-ending circle with the plastics issue that they're dealing with. So
actually, Kai, I'm curious. Did you start Indosole because you saw that there were too many tires, and then you were like, I can turn this into sandals? Or did you think of sandals and then you saw the opportunity for tires?
Yeah, so my business partner Kyle started the whole process when he found a pair of tires, a pair of sandals with tires on the bottom, and then he realized with all the motorbikes in Bali and the beach issue, when we met, it was just like already, you know, in me because of being in Bali and understanding in the mid-2000s that waste issue was going on. Once you do the research into tires, it's mind-blowing of how many tires are used every year and discarded. And theoretically, the first one from Charles Goodyear still out there, and it's just so hard to. They don't decompose. So when you start looking at that and then looking at the opportunity, it was really exciting back in 2009 of like figuring out this whole like, you know, I love the puzzle of this waste issue, and it's huge because it leads to being part of a community, this larger ecosystem of developing this sort of industry. And that was actually one of the more exciting things to me was how do you partner with people? You know, how do you, you know, kind of what you said of opening the conversation with some of these larger companies. And I think that's still one of our biggest, and this is why we've gotten along so well with the boys here at Sungaiwatch and Kelly at Sungaiwatch and the team there, is because just this whole ecosystem is just so alive and well right now, and especially, you know, with ambassadors like you guys, there's just so much left to do, but the steps being made are all positive. And sometimes they go slow, and as you guys know, that's actually a good question for you guys. As things progress and, you know, you're making more machines and you're making more barriers, but there's always setbacks, right? Like some of the trash maybe will break through a barrier, or you're not getting the response from government or businesses that you'd like. How do you guys deal with that? Do you have to go outside and blow smoke and
like rejection or bureaucracy
and the slow movement of things? What's your long-term I guess health and mind on that?
I think it's looking at the vision and not being disturbed by, because it's always things always take time, and there's always setbacks and there's always things that don't work, but it's looking at the positive things. When you see a barrier that has been there for a year, and now, you know, it was the most dirty little stream, and now fish have come back. Dude. You know, when you see that, it's like, whoa, like, you know, although a barrier will break, you know, this happens sometimes. Or then when you see communities now, you know, because they live next to a barrier, they don't use as much plastic, and because the whole purpose of placing a barrier is that they
see it now. They see
exactly. So it's actually the barrier is a very visual tool to show people that what their consumption is.
Wow, okay.
And the ideal scenario is that Sungaiwatch doesn't exist, that we don't need to be placing barriers in rivers, but there's always going to be plastic. Hopefully one day
So good,
no
man.
longer, but there's always bad days, but I think just staying true to the mission.
But then on a more immediate short term, we're really looking at the 1,000 most polluted rivers in Indonesia. We've mapped most of them being in Java, most populated island in the world, where Kai grew up, Jakarta. Yo, what's up?
J-Town.
J-Town. Just that.
So unique as an individual. Keep going.
Chalandak.
But California.
Block M.
But then, so 1,000 rivers, and I forgot what was I saying.
Yeah, no, you're just talking about your wins. Staying focused on the 1,000 rivers ahead of you, which is your current goal,
Exactly,
right? So
exactly.
let's be clear there. So you've got 150.
Yeah.
They're all in Bali. Is that correct?
They're all in Bali. We're setting 20 this month in Java, in Banyuwangi, East Java. Next up is really trying to push the agenda of 1,000. I would have loved to place 1,000 last year or yesterday, but these guys keep me in check. And I think that it's amazing to work with a brother and our sister Kelly, as we're all super complementary. Our sister Kelly, who couldn't be here today, comes from the financial sector. She has a big economic background, studied entrepreneurship.
Triple threat. Keep going.
And she's like, handling all of the super administrative things, SOPs, partnerships as well. And so we're sort of all trying to, move toward in this journey and making sure that there's a long-term commitment, and it's not like we're going to vanish, unless there's plastic pollution in rivers. We want to be there,
Dude, and it ties in, like, everyone's playing their role, and it's like what Kai was saying in terms of, the ecosystem. Like, you need someone with a finance background to keep, otherwise,
Exactly, yeah.
you need all that stuff. But I want to go on a different tangent here. Like, man, you guys must find some shit in those rivers, dude. Like, what's some of the gnarliest stuff you've found? Like,
our team,
I've got one. But I have got one thing I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Gabe, what do you got?
Our team, about a year ago, found like a dead baby with an umbilical cord around its neck. And that was probably the most horrendous thing that we've ever found. Police were already on the location. And then we just find, any type of dead animals that you can think about, from, giant pythons that have been killed and thrown away, to babi, guling, the pigs here on Bali. Every single day we were finding, 2 to 3. And then dead dogs, dead cats, dead chickens. The dead baby was definitely the most horrible thing. And then on a more funny note, we're finding dildos. We're finding some...
Can you use that plastic?
Can you what?
I didn't know to say. Can you repurpose that?
Can you reuse it?
Putting them on that. No, we haven't yet.
I've had a big day, all right? I'm just... Anyway, sorry.
Then there's another dildo thing for guys, but...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We don't know anything.
Anyways,
But in terms of plastics,
sexual toys.
in terms of plastics, that's everything you can think of.
Yeah.
And it's just like, one of the things we find the most of, which is disgusting, and we don't know what to do with it, is diapers.
Of course.
There's so many diapers in our
And they're
rivers.
heavy, huh?
And they're heavy. And
They're made to absorb,
And so they're made out of, a synthetic plastic, and you just, what are you going to do with that? There's human waste on that. It's like feces. So
You could shred it and dry it and mix it with cement and make pavement blocks, but do you really want to have, have a house
who's
or a
going to buy
pavement
that?
block?
Yeah.
The diapers.
Yeah.
Block.
So there's still a
shit house.
There's still a percentage of what we collect that we have to send to landfill.
Okay.
So we don't keep 100% of the materials we collect. But no, we find so many dirty things and a lot of plastic. And this is our worst nightmare, is when we collect it, we go through all this effort. We're so happy that it's no longer going to the ocean, but there's, and we try to wrap our heads around what we can do with this material, but it's just either too deteriorated, maybe it's burnt, because a lot of plastic here in Indonesia has been burnt.
Yep.
And so we have to send it to
that
landfill.
renders it useless?
Yeah, pretty
if
much.
If it's semi-burnt?
Pretty much, because then, the qualities of it are reduced, or like the shape of it's completely torn. but we find everything in the rivers.
So
And
interesting.
at the moment, landfilling, is not the best solution. Most landfills on Bali are still open, so they leak to the floor. Toxic chemicals,
Unregulated.
They're overfilled.
They don't put the liner down, I heard. There's no lining.
No, there's nothing. It's open air.
Yeah. So yes, we are looking at other incineration alternatives, but we don't. There's none yet in Indonesia that prove that pyrolysis, or obviously, like, if you could take all Bali's waste and turn it into electricity, that would be the dream. And a lot of people tend to think that way, but they don't understand about humidity content. All of the trash that we're collecting is very humid, is very wet. And the drying processes are huge. You need so much electricity to power that alone. You could rely on the sun, but you would need giant land. So I think back to what Guy was saying, the logistics aspect of waste management is one of the biggest hustle of why Indonesia is the way that it is.
But you're attacking it. It's ambitious.
Tiny little drop. Like, if we've collected 550,000 kilos, so about half. Half a thousand.
550 tons.
550 tons
In total,
which is nothing. Like,
in 22 months.
Indonesia, like Bali alone, produces about 1,600 tons a day.
I mean, it's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah,
but
that's not what we've collected in 21 months. Is not even one day's worth of what Bali produces. So we're far away.
I mean, are you having moments where it's like the problem's too big?
Definitely, especially going into Java and seeing, I was just in Java a couple of months ago, and I ran into Indonesia's biggest illegal landfill, and it was like a 14-hectare, giant, massive landfill that was leaking right into the river, and you see the scale of the problem. In Java, you don't see rice fields on every side of the street. You see trash dumps, literally. Bekasi, just next to where Kai grew up. Jakarta, what's up? Straight down.
Block in.
Straight down.
Hey, so I have a question in regards to that, because I've come up with this term, modern day mining. I think I've said it a few times on this podcast before, said it to you guys. So what's your thoughts on this idea of, is that landfill worth something?
Dude, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But how can we get to a point, and this is where another clog or another person in this ecosystem is research, right? Which is what you guys have developed and had really a high success with bringing people to the table with, which is basically research and data management, right? So what does that process look like to value a dump, a landfill?
Ooh.
I think it's trying to find creative ways to add value to products. So, right now it's as simple as taking a plastic bag. One of our sheets, 1 by 1 meter, uses around 800 plastic bags that are pressed. They go through a 3-hour process, and then, it adds 50 times, what the plastic bags would have been retailed for in the industrial recycling industry in Surabaya. All of a sudden, boom, we've given 50 times more value to it. So it's having these processes in store, and that comes with investment. So if you know that, most landfills in Indonesia are probably, 50% of the waste is in the plastic bracket is plastic bags, but then, on a general waste bracket, it's 65% organic and 35% plastic. Also, as you're unraveling a landfill, you have methane gas that are being released. So it's not like we can clean up every single landfill out there, but you can definitely scatter through the top layer and give it value. And that's what we're doing. We're literally going into so we have the barriers, but also now we have a dedicated emergency cleanup branch, and that is to eliminate illegal landfills along rivers, on sides of the bridges, in the mangroves, and that's become almost our biggest operation. Like, we have it clean up every single day. So for any of you out here in Bali, please do come out, because it's going to change your life.
So you've achieved this in 21 months?
Yeah.
It's so, wow. You guys have been busy. Tell me what it was like. You said your family have been here for 20 years in Bali?
Yeah, 18 years.
So that means you've spent a majority of your life here.
Yeah, definitely.
Describe growing up in Bali
Yeah, it's
as a young person.
it's pretty good. It's paradise. 18 years ago, there was not all this construction. You weren't allowed to build higher than the coconut trees, and I mean, your playground is the beach, it's the rice fields, and you're exposed to so much nature that I think you're not otherwise exposed to when you grew up in a more developed world or country. And I think that's really why we do the work that we do. Is we grew up in Bali, where we had a river that is literally right next to our house. The beach was 150 meters away, and every weekend we'd go climb a mountain, or we'd I don't know do some adventure, and it was pretty nice. And I think
I can imagine. What was your parents' motivation for moving you here as young children?
Just like retirement, wanting to find. They're a little bit older, so they wanting to find a different life mechanism, and just. I mean, like we have the huge privilege that our parents are very, very supportive in everything that we've been doing, and so they've wanted to change our lives, have us grow up in Bali, and and it's been definitely life changing. I consider myself Balinese, like Madligari Aso.
You do.
And I love Bali, and it's in my heart, and it's in everything that we've been ever doing. We're going to be staying here forever. We'll be always attached to here.
Well, that's actually one of my questions.
Yeah.
Like, will you ever leave Bali?
Never.
Never.
Except if it's to go to Java, to J-Town.
Which is rare. It's rare for a Balinese guy to leave Bali.
No, but never. I think, like even going to Alaspuro for 2 weeks, you want to come back to the homeland.
Is that how you feel, Sam?
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of attachment here, but I also have a girlfriend in New York, so things are a bit harder. But I mean, I love Bali to death, and I definitely consider this my home more than France or New York. That's why I like this half-half.
What a great balance of
Yeah.
life, hey? Yeah, seriously, New York to Bali.
And is that what kind of led you to going down this path of being protectors of the environment here and the people? How do you see the waste impacting Bali the most, or what brought you? What was the sort of ignition point to really scaring you or really impacting you in a way that you said, hey, I want to figure out how to stop this?
Just seeing our home beach, Batu Lake back in the days was full of, it's where Potato Head is where the W is. It was just a line of coconut trees, and there was nothing else. First big rainy season we were here, to see it, it was full of wood. The next year, it was plastic started to come into the picture, and then more and more plastics. Right around the time that you guys get started, 2009, we were like, we need to do something about this. I was 14, Sam was 12, Kelly was 16, and we're like, okay, let's try to climb a volcano, raise a little bit of money, and start a cleanup organization. And so it was under a different name back then.
What was the original name?
Make a Change Bali. But then every single weekend we had a meeting. We had like an agenda to go to the beach and clean it up. So we're going all around the island, from Ahmed to Tulamben to Sanur to Nusa Dua, just getting youth involved and getting cleanups.
Beach cleanups.
Yeah. And then very quickly, the next day after a very nice cleanup, more plastics would come back. So we were like sweeping the floor, but more and more. It's like if you have a tap and you're not fixing the tap at the source, you're just cleaning the floor.
How old were you when you guys first started that?
14, so 13 years ago, and Sam was 12.
Yeah, it's just like 14 years old and 12 years old. I mean, do you remember the moment you guys had the idea to do your first beach cleanup? Did you guys go, hey, like, how was that idea conceived as two young people?
I remember.
Or was it sorry to cut you off, or was it prompted by parents?
No, fully by us. I loved to organize stuff when I was younger.
Did you?
I would do ping pong tournaments with the local village. I did all the talent shows at the school. I was president of the school, little Gary, trying to get things done. But then I saw this campaign that was called 350.org, which got released right around my birthday, 2009. And it was about the parts per million in the atmosphere, and they were getting basically a bunch of different global events to get a banner up of 350. Right now we're way above 450. We're about at 470 parts per million. But it's just a very humbling path that in 13 years of activism, we've completely destroyed our planet, to make it so much worse. And this was 13 years ago. And that's what started the entire thing. It started with a hike. And then, the most visual thing that we could do was plastic. So that's when we started the cleanups.
I think it's really enchanting. It really inspires a lot of people, man. It really is.
Thank you, man.
I think people are feeling more and more concerned, and there's a lot of fear in our world at the moment. And I think these kind of projects give hope. So I think it's more than just plastic collection. It's hope.
Bringing to that idea of invoking fear in the world, I feel that in my experience, there's been a lot of fear in regards to some of these dates that countries are putting out. One being 2030, another being 2050. I wanted to get your guys' take on it, on how you see this, I guess, climate change evolving, waste management evolving, and how long do you think it really is going to take? Let's start with Indonesia, but let's start with the world. Let's say even in a developing country, how long is it going to take? Because right now, let's face it, the U.S. is recycling, I think, 8% of their waste, right? So, if the U.S. is recycling 8%, how are we really going to, get this train moving into a direction? And how crucial do you see some of these dates being?
Yeah, I think there's so many dates, yet we're still seeing, by 2030, plastic production is going to double. So we're not going
triple
is in the right direction at all. Like we're not going towards that path. But we're seeing, startups. We're seeing individuals. We're seeing activism really build up. I don't know how far and comparing those two that's going to go, but I'm hopeful because obviously we're doing this work. But at the same time, you look at the stats and you look at the numbers out there of the polluters of petrol and gas, and it's pretty terrifying. We're not.
Yeah, but without action, nothing changes.
Of course,
exactly. Like thinking about stuff and talking about stuff just brings about more thinking and talking. But you guys are taking action, and maybe who knows? You could develop a piece of machinery and a processing formula and method that's really efficient, and big companies jump on and they start using that. That's how it happens, right? They small from little things, big things grow. So. But I guess my pessimistic mind keeps going back to, I'm so impressed because I don't know, I think I'd get disheartened very quickly.
Yeah. But I think that going back to Kai's point, we've been successful once before, and literally by getting the president's attention to get things rolling out here in Indonesia with the kayaking trip, we took down the most polluted river in the world, and in 4 months, boom, national level agenda to clean up the river in 7 years. And in Indonesia, it was once run by military. It's a very, if the top down says do it, we've seen it with things like the helmets. A couple years ago when Bali was like, we're going to start finding everybody that doesn't wear a helmet, and literally top down approach. Same thing with the masks. Same thing with vaccines. It's nothing to do with plastic pollution, but if Indonesia decides tomorrow to have put barriers in every single river, we're more than open to assist. And they need to be the hero at the end of the day.
Yeah, man.
And G20 is around the block, and that's where, we're super, super optimistic about the next few months and trying to push a meeting with the president over the next few months to really try to get, this top-down approach. What we've built over the last 21 months can be replicated at a massive scale if Indonesia decides to replicate. And at the end of the day, they'll be the heroes, in the world as the second biggest polluter of plastic pollution to the ocean. So, Jokowi, if you're watching,
yes,
Joko.
I hope so.
Joko with Dodo. So the G20 is coming up, and that's a pretty interesting thing for Indonesia because there's going to be a lot of eyes here because apparently Putin's coming. Potentially, I'm not 100% sure. So Sorry if I'm wrong, but that's what I've heard is that Russia has an open invitation to attend here in Bali in the G20.
Yeah, if they pull out of the war.
If they, so is that the official stance?
Yes.
So they're open to, they have an invitation if they pull out of the war.
Exactly.
Okay, well that's interesting. But there's going to be a lot of eyes on Bali at that point. Is there a lead up that you guys have that you're working on? Is that what a lot of your PR efforts are going towards right now, and some of your energy to start engaging? Is it first the Indonesian government? Is there any other governments you're trying to engage?
Global. Last week on Friday, like a week ago, we had like German foreign ministry come down. With the UK ministry coming down as well.
Okay.
So now that all the governments are looking at Bali, looking at ways of giving back, looking at ways of faster, sustainable development for Indonesia, they're really looking at actual solutions that are implemented. And because the G20 is partly hosted in the mangroves, they're building these beautiful pavilions in the mangroves that we cleaned up, and we're still cleaning up. And now slowly we're coming closer to the event sites, and we're not going to stop. We're literally going to be publicizing, the heck out of the reality, and hopefully, it can open some eyes. But that's sort of our strategy with the G20 coming up, to sort of, put it in their face, but also try to really anticipate the dialogue that may be happening, not just on Bali, but really inspire, what can happen on Java. Again, Java should be the main point of concern for any environmental issue. It's developed way too quickly over the last, century, and I think that's where so much of the work is left to be done. When looking at plastic pollution and other environmental concerns.
Nice. Just on a quick tangent, are you processing down the surgical face masks? Have you got a technique for that, or are you able to use them?
We're not, but we have some partners that do process it.
Okay, so you are collecting them, and you're finding solutions for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that'd be a big one, obviously. Yeah. Well, how are we all feeling? You guys feel all right?
Yeah, man.
I still have a lingering question, and I want to do some brand.
Well, no, can we go back to your first question?
Yeah. Well, I want to let's see this. So let's do some brand association, right? Okay, let's start with you. Okay, so let's say Sungaiwatch. Name 2 brands that you associate them with.
Ooh, good question. Well, I have done a bit of research on you guys. Well, no, I do automatically go to Danone. I don't know why I associate you them. And the other one is Potato Head. And you know why? Because I was randomly there having some dinner a few months ago, and there was this beautiful paneling around the bar or near the bar. Or was it on the tables? I can't remember. And everyone's like, "Oh, did you know that's made from upcycled plastic? There's this company called Sungaiwatch." And I'm like, "Oh no, I've heard of those guys." So I do. I have this association with you and Potato Head, and for some reason Danone. There you go.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. What about you, Gary? 2 brands that you see Sungaiwatch. First of all, do you see Sungaiwatch as a brand in itself?
Yes. Oh, sorry. I guess hopefully more and more.
Keep going. You're right.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Keep going.
More and more as we start to publish, start to release products ourselves, and trying to leave more of a legacy behind what we're doing. I would say Indosole. Thank you, Indosole.
Right.
Nice.
Our first partner.
Thank you.
Is that what you're building up to?
Thank you. What about you, Sam? What are some brands that you feel Sungaiwatch is as a brand you think of 2 other brands that are sort of in that realm?
I mean, not that I compare ourselves to them, but it's kind of like our iconic vision. Just when we're speaking about ourselves and just like where we want to go, and I would say Patagonia. They're just doing some incredible work with everything on their nonprofit side, on their product side. They're super sustainable. And then the other one would maybe be the North Face, similarly doing similar work. I mean, they were actually founded by the same person, but yeah.
And that same climbing crew of Yosemite. Yeah. All right, I've got 3. All right, got Apple. I've got Tesla.
Okay.
And I've got SpaceX.
Okay, can you explain why?
Because nobody knows what the 3 of those guys are doing and how they got to where they are. And the immense impact that they've been able to have on society
And culture.
and culture, right? So Apple, think different. They changed the way we interact with each other, really, with our handphones. Maybe not to the ultimate best, but over the years they've changed the workforce. They've changed and human interaction, right? Along with, there's other players in there, internet, maybe social media. Then you've got Tesla, right, which has changed an entire industry of automotive, which is a massive industry, right? So they've now basically turned that up on the end, and there's a bunch of work left to do, but with their batteries and that whole implementation is going to be a really interesting next 20 years for them. They're going to go beyond cars and planes, and I mean their battery development in its own, changing, harnessing solar power into batteries is going to be one of the more interesting, I think, elements that they're going to bring. But then the third one is SpaceX, which is really like, what are they doing, right? Like, and why, right? Like, there's so many issues down here on Earth. Why is SpaceX even a thing? And when you hear sort of the reasons behind it, it's like the unknown, and they can't really figure it out. And when you look at the value of some of these companies, it's unreal, and you can't really quantify it, right? So you're looking at, Elon Musk is now the richest man in the world because of these companies, right? And so I associate Sungaiwatch with those three brands.
Wow.
Because it's the impact that's potentially viable, that they're going to inspire, is on par with what Tesla has done with the automotive industry, right? So this logistics, the processing, the realization of some of these secondary resources that they really have intricate value, and get some of these larger companies involved. So the value that they're creating on the end game of these resources is where I see the company and the foundation being ultimately valued at a number that I have in my head.
Yes, we're going back to this. Go, keep going.
So let's say if Sungaiwatch as an entity, right? Let's just play this game, right? Because we know that you guys don't want to sell Sungaiwatch, and nobody should buy Sungaiwatch because you guys are the right people to run it. But there's always room for investment, right? So if you accept investors, right, for a portion of the company and foundation, I'm saying that you should accept no less than a valuation of X amount. Now, do you guys want to guess what that amount is?
Yeah.
Or do you guys have a Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say it.
No.
I think it is $500 billion.
Do you guys agree? I love that.
Okay.
I mean, I think if you look at the possibilities of all the plastics that's out there, it's like a $7 trillion industry. If you were to clean up everything out there, recycle it, that's the number. So, just focusing on Indonesia, if we can clean it up all up, then maybe. But that is a big number.
1/14 the value of all plastic. It's nothing. So maybe I'm undervaluing it.
Well, here's a question. What if you got offered $500 billion tomorrow for Sungaiwatch? Would you take it?
Definitely.
I mean, you could do so much work with that.
I would
100%.
Set up another Sungaiwatch.
No, I mean, we could set up Sungaiwatches in every country.
Yeah.
And that's actually something we're looking at.
Amazing.
I went to Colombia in December, and there's so much enthusiasm and interest from countries from like the Philippines to, every country has, plastic is a problem everywhere, and we would accept the money.
Yeah, I think the main issue right now, and the reason I compare them to SpaceX, is because nobody really understands it.
Yeah.
Right? We're at the starting point of understanding what this value is that they're creating. Right? They're creating intrinsic value in nature. How do you value that? But the real value comes on the economical language, that stock market, that whole thing comes from when they get these resources at the end of the day. And I think that value is nobody understands that yet, but it's going to be massive. It's actually going to be mining for gold, mining for copper, mining for lithium, mining for oil and gas. That's where this is headed. I see when I look 20, 30 years in the future, that's where these guys are really starting the game on that. And once people get involved in the machine per se starts really growing, I mean, these resources are going to be very, very valuable, and that's where people are going to start looking at Sungaiwatch as a $500 billion company.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, and I hope we listen to this in 20 years' time. And that's happened. I think you two and your sister as well are amazing change makers, and this is what change makers do. Like, I really agree with what Kai's saying, is they think outside the square. They're brave enough to step into the unknown. So, dude, that's why I think like I said, you're getting into the hearts and the minds of so many people. So well done. It's beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't know. Got any more questions, Kai? But I love that. I'm glad you asked that question.
Yeah, it's a funny thing to think about, but it's kind of true. The value there for the long term is massive.
Yeah, actually, are you regarded as a social enterprise or a non-for-profit?
So we actually have both.
Okay.
We have our foundation side, which is the cleanup side, the river collection, and then the upcycling of plastics is our for-profit branch, social enterprise.
Okay.
So we actually have a foundation set up here in Indonesia, a foundation set up in the US to fundraise in the United States, and then the for-profit branch here in Indonesia will turn the plastics into products.
And give back, most of the profit back to the foundation.
Got you. Okay. So I ask all guests to come to the podcast with a cause they want to support or advocate for. And in this instance, and Sam and I were discussing it earlier, that you guys are the cause to advocate for. So if someone was to want to support you, tell us the best way to go about it.
Yeah, in person, come to the cleanup.
So you prefer manpower, or people on the ground floor?
Definitely, it changes your life, and it gets you to see the problem with your real hands.
Yeah.
If you cannot be on Bali and you can't come to the cleanup, any donation of any amounts goes such a long way. So that we can directly equate what your donation has done directly on the ground with our data, so we can give you access to all of that.
Okay.
And that transparency.
You can go to sungai.watch is our website.
Sungai.watch.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll put that link in this episode's show notes, and it will follow this episode around on all the major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Buzzsprout, Stitcher, and whatever podcast platform you like to listen on. It always helps if you follow or leave a review, and it just helps me to continue to produce weekly episodes and give people like Gary and Sam a voice to share their ideas. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, man.
So stoked.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Guy.
And again,
Thanks, Shan.
Big thank you to Mr. Kai Paul.
No, thanks for doing the podcast, Shan. Love Terrible Happy Talks.
Thank you, brother.
And so happy to have the guys from Sungaiwatch, and I wish Kelly was here and all the crew. But yeah, kudos to you guys.
Kudos
Keep
to you
going.
guys.
Keep pushing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go.